difficulty. We're going to start anyway, and hopefully the webinar people will catch up with us shortly. My name is Estelle Pearson, and I'd like to thank you all for coming along today to hear me speak about the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse. Now, it's obviously been in the news a lot over the last couple of years, and of course over the last week we've had it on the news a lot because of Cardinal Pell appearing before the Commission. So what I was going to talk about today is a bit of background to the Commission, then talk about the work that they've done, the recommendations they've made around redress and civil litigation, and finally talking about actuarial challenges. Now, we were fortunate enough to work for the Commission and do some of the costings for the Commission, so we're going to sort of talk both about the challenges that we had in doing that work for them, as well as what I see as some of the challenges for institutions and insurers, and therefore probably actuaries, as we move into a new world. So the Commission was established in 2013. It was originally supposed to do its final report by December 2015, but it got that extended to 2017, and that was really because of the extent and the volumes of people and who were approaching the Commission, and they realised they wouldn't get their work done in the original timeframe. They have, however, released a couple of reports in the meantime, and to the extent that there are recommendations in those reports, those are also their final recommendations and will be repeated in their final report. So the purpose of the Royal Commission is to inquire into institutional responses to allegations and incidents of child sexual abuse and related matters. There are 6 commissioners. There are floor loads of staff supporting the Royal Commission. There are lawyers, there are public servants. They're based in, not just in Sydney, there are people sort of around the country, because a lot of what the work that the Commission's done has been around the country. I'll come back to that in a moment. The terms of reference to the Commission are set out in their letters patents on their website. You can have a look at it. It really, I guess, the terms of reference have 3 key focuses. The first is on protection, so the protection of children and the prevention of child sexual abuse in an institutional setting in the first stage. The second is in terms of responses, so looking at how child sexual abuse is reported and how allegations and incidents are subsequently dealt with by institutions and also by the police and by others and social services, etc. And then eliminating impediments to responses, things that prevent an adequate response at the time that abuse is first reported. And the final thrust is around justice for victims, and I guess that sort of is about alleviating and addressing the impact of past and future sexual abuse on children, and providing a way for the victims of abuse to seek and have justice. And that's sort of the redress area that I was most, the part that I was involved in. The Commission has done their work in a number of ways. They have held, they've held a number of public hearings, which are around case studies. So far to date, they've had a bit of a list here. They've had 37, and they're just about to launch into the 38th public hearing. Each of those hearings sort of centres around a particular case study. Now, most of them have been around looking at specific institutions, and they have looked at every institution where sexual abuse has occurred, but they picked and looked at specific institutions where they felt that it would advance an understanding of the abuse that had occurred and any systemic issues, that it would be an opportunity to learn from mistakes made in terms of the prevention and also responses to abuse, the extent of abuse, and also to enhance in the general public the understanding of the extent and type of abuse that occurred, because it's obviously not necessarily, you know, in the wider society a good understanding of that. So just to sort of give you an idea for those who have been following the Commission closely, you know, a number of the case studies have been around various aspects of the Roman Catholic Church and other, the Anglicans and other religious institutions. There's been a number of schools that have been the subjects of case studies, the YMCA, the Scouts, there was one recently actually, the Dance and Australian Institute of Music. So, you know, a whole variety. Once they also did case studies looking at the Roman Catholic Church's responses to these allegations in terms of the Melbourne response towards healing, which are two sort of redress schemes that the Roman Catholic Church has set up. So there's to say 37 today, and the 38th is going to be on the criminal justice system. So sort of looking beyond particular institutions. They also have had private sessions, so that gave the victims and survivors of abuse, or maybe their families, the opportunity to contact the Commission and have a private session with one of the commissioners. And it was felt that it was really important for people to be able to tell their story and for the commissioners to be able to hear that story firsthand. When we did our work with the Commission, which we completed in 2015, I think they held about 2,500 private sessions. So my guess is it's over 3,000 by now. That's less than the number of people who contact them, because not everybody actually goes on and has a private session. But I'm not sure at the end of it how many they will actually held, but that's one of the reasons why they extended the time frame. And I know early on when we first got involved with them, with the Commission in 2014, they sort of were still getting the same number of new inquiries every month that they had from the start. So there hadn't been any slowdown in the number of phone calls that they were getting from people inquiring about the private session. They have done a number of research, so they've commissioned research into key areas that they're looking at, like child protection, redress, you know, the areas they're looking at. Mostly from universities and academics, and they've got a number of those projects going. I think they've got something like 23 research projects completed and a further 23 underway and 8 yet to start. So quite a lot of research trying to sort of understand the issues of child sexual abuse in an institutional section, context further. And they've issued a number of issues papers which enable organisations, individuals to put submissions in on various issues. So they've got 10 completed issues papers, and they're on things like advocacy and support and therapeutic treatment services, risk of child sexual abuse in schools, civil litigation, redress schemes, child safe institutions, working with children checks. So they've got sort of had a number of those. The Actuaries Institute have put in submissions to the paper on redress. I think we put in 2, one for the issues paper, and I think we put in a submission on the draft report as well. And we had at the Institute, we had a small working party who were part of that. One of the other things that the Commission has done was to have closed session, round table sessions. I don't know whether they did this outside of redress. They certainly had it on redress and civil litigation. And they had various institutions there. They had victims groups and support groups, and they had the Actuaries Institute as well, so we were able to go and be part of those roundtable discussions. Now, at the moment, as I said, the Commission's due to do their final report at the end of 2017. They've actually issued 2 reports so far, one on redress and civil litigation, which I'll talk about more, and the other one is on working with children checks. So let's look at the recommendations on redress. So the report, if you are interested, I would recommend going to their website, download the report, having a read, certainly the executive summary. provides a really easy read, I think, and then gives you sort of quite a lot of background to their recommendations. So I've tried to pull out the 5 things that I think are key in those recommendations. So the first thing that they have recommended is a single national scheme. We have had some redress schemes in the past, but they've been state-based or institutionally based. So a single national scheme covering all institutions, and that is important from a couple of perspectives. The first is from an equity perspective. So it doesn't matter what type of institution someone was abused in, whether it was a government institution, whether it was a private school, whether it was a sporting association or some other sort of voluntary group or association. No matter the context in which someone was abused, if they were abused in an institution with a very broad definition of what an institution is, then they would be in the same scheme and they would be treated in the same way, both in terms of access to redress and also the type of redress available. Now, there is some support for that, but they had a sort of second recommendation that if a single national scheme wasn't possible because of the difficulties of getting the state and federal governments to all agree, then there should be a series of state-based schemes, all of which would follow the same principles. Another reason, and certainly in the roundtables, hearing the support groups talk and the survivors, that a single national scheme sort of run by the governments is important for survivors. It means that survivors don't have to go back to the institution where the abuse occurred. And so, you're not kind of going back and asking them for redress, you're sort of going through what's seen as a sort of a more independent party. So that was the first part. The second is reasonable likelihood. So this is sort of the access threshold. Now, under criminal justice, you have a high level of proof. Under civil litigation, it's the balance of probabilities. Under the redress scheme, it's intended to be reasonable likelihood. So that's intended to be a lower standard of proof than balance of probabilities. And also the way that reasonable likelihood would be assessed would be a much more administrative process. So it wouldn't be the survivor providing evidence and then the institution providing evidence and then an adversarial situation where the survivors question and query about their evidence and then someone sort of makes a decision about on balance of probabilities, who do we believe. So a much more administrative process and a lower threshold level. And I would say that the schemes that we've had, certainly the government schemes in Australia that we've had in the past, have been more around a level of plausibility. So reasonable likelihood is seen to be above plausibility but below balance of probabilities, and it's meant to make access much easier than the civil litigation system. Direct response. So redress is kind of, well, it is different to civil litigation. It encompasses potentially a broader range of needs for a survivor than just pure monetary compensation for loss. And the direct response has sort of been seen as a really important part of the various redress schemes that have already existed, both here and overseas, and also in the Commission's recommendations. So what it is it's an acknowledgement by the institution that the abuse occurred. It would be an apology. It might include guarantees that this won't happen again and why it won't happen again. And the intent is that it provides a level of satisfaction to the survivor. Now, it's not, a survivor doesn't have to partake in a direct response, it's at their option, but if they choose to, then the institution has to provide a direct response. And they also, importantly, we did a bit of quite a lot of wide reading and research for another paper we wrote for the injury seminar scheme talking about the impact of redress. It's really important that people giving the direct response have adequate training, because otherwise it can sort of end up not providing the satisfaction that it's intended to, and a lot of very well-intentioned things in the past actually ended up having a negative impact. The fourth element is counselling. Now, I think this is also different for this scheme. This scheme that's being recommended here is unique, I think, in the reading I've done about around the world in the breadth of coverage. It covers all institutions on a national basis. But also, the ones I've looked at, most schemes don't provide, they might provide a lump sum of money towards counselling, but they don't provide lifetime access. So the intent of the counselling is that it's available for the lifetime of the survivor. The reason that's important is that a lot of survivors will have episodic issues, so they don't just occur once and then that's it. They might occur at different stages of their life. And it may also take sort of a long time past the abuse for them to recognise the issues and to seek assistance. Medicare does exist, and obviously Medicare does provide a certain level of benefit, but there are some quite severe limitations for Medicare, both in terms of access and also in terms of the amount of treatment. So, for example, from an access perspective, someone who's been the victim of sexual abuse has to go to their GP to get referred on, so they have to tell their story to the GP, and they have to may or may not be well qualified to deal well with someone who's in that situation, and then they have to go and talk with the psychologist who then assesses what they need and so they feel, and then after the maximum 10 sessions, they have to be assessed about whether they qualify to have more sessions. And so from a victim's perspective, they feel that they're having to retell their story over and over again, whereas once they were under this recommendation, once they've been assessed as having access to the scheme, then they would have this ongoing access to counselling. There are also victims of crime schemes in every state, and that does also provide a level of cover. But a couple of points there. Again, there's limits on them from a financial sense, only so many sessions. There's also some of the access processes are quite cumbersome and difficult. There's also not-for-profit and various government-funded organisations that provide assistance for people who've been sexually abused. But again, those and when some of those talking at the round table, their resources are limited and they tend to be preferential treatment to those people who have been abused recently, rather than those whose abuse is more historic. And the third element of the scheme is a monetary payment. And this is probably one of the aspects that everybody agrees you need to have a monetary payment, but then a lot of people end up not being really satisfied with the monetary payment that's received. But it's important because from the survivor's perspective, without a monetary payment and some financial hardship of the institution, then they feel that there's not really a proper acknowledgement. Someone said they're sorry, it's not going to happen again, but they're really sorry because it will be $5,000 or $10,000, and that's not enough for the loss and the impacts that this has had on my life. So they've recommended a monetary payment. They have recommended a minimum of $10,000 and a maximum of $200,000. The work that we did, they've also recommended a scale approach to assess the severity of abuse. So there's a value of between 1 and 40, depending on the severity of abuse. Another between 1 and 40, depending on the impact of the abuse, and between 1 and 20, what they call other elements, which sort of include being in an isolated situation, say in a residential care situation, the power difference between the victim and the perpetrator, and things like that. So we did some work and assessed sort of an average of about 65,000. Now that's higher than the amounts that have been provided by existing redress schemes, government redress schemes we've had in Australia, but it is lower than the average common law amounts and what people would get at common law. So there's obviously a trade-off between the access through the reasonable likelihood and the monetary payment and the amount. And that's always difficult. And we in one of the cases we did a lot of research trying to understand what's the impact of redress, and you read through. There's unfortunately a lot of studies looking at that and assessing how well redress schemes have done in terms of assisting victims. But there's always some complaints about the amount of the monetary award, which can sometimes just be someone else got more and so it didn't seem fair that someone suffered in a similar way, they got more money and they got less money, or the amounts changed over time, things like that. So having a transparent framework is important, but I'm sure there'll still be people who won't be satisfied with the amount. I think the other thing I want to say about recommendations is they are recommending a deed of release. So that if someone accepts a monetary payment, then the institution would be released from any further action. And the person could have funded legal support to make an assessment about whether they were going to make that accept the amount. And so the other thing I didn't really make clear was that the recommendation is that the funding will come from the institution who was responsible or where the abuse took place. That's going to be tricky because some people were obviously in different institutional settings and were abused in more than one setting. But that's where the funding should come from. And then the government or governments should step in as the funder of last resort where an institution either doesn't exist anymore or doesn't have enough money. Now I think that the federal government, the last I heard from them was that they weren't happy to be the funder of last resort. I know both New South Wales and Victoria have come out sort of in principle in favour of the recommendations on redress, and they've also taken some action on civil litigation. But I guess other states, and particularly states that have already had redress schemes, have said that they're not interested in reopening the matter, although they've actually said that publicly. They've probably said nothing publicly. So that's where we're at the moment in terms of the recommendations and responses from the different governments. So one thing I should add there is that a lot of the institutions and non-government institutions are very much in favour of this scheme, that single national scheme. The Catholic Church, some of the other churches are very, very in favour of this, recognising that they will be major contributors. Because from the institution's perspective, they too want to be able to move past this, to alleviate the past as well as they can, and to move forward in terms of their reputations and their sort of relationships with their constituents. I thought it's worthwhile looking a little bit at the past schemes that we've had. So, three governments, Queensland, WA and Tasmania, all had redress schemes. They covered mostly out-of-home care. They were all a little bit different. WA covered foster care as well as residential care. Queensland didn't. So there's always sort of, small differences, but that's what they all did. They also all covered physical abuse and psychological abuse and neglect as well as sexual abuse. The Royal Commission, in terms of reference, only covers sexual abuse. So the recommendations they're making on redress schemes, etc., are only about sexual abuse, which they do acknowledge as being a bit of a gap in terms of what they're recommending, but they don't have the terms of reference to actually recommend anything else. So we were fortunate that we were able to get some information from each of those schemes about some of the details. So we knew how many participants were for sexual abuse, were for, there might be physical abuse and neglect as well, but they included sexual abuse, which were about a half of, if you double them, that's the total number of people. So you can see there's sort of about 2,600 people in the Queensland scheme, 2,900 in WA, 800 in Tasmania. Average payments of about between 13,000 in Queensland and 30,000 in the other two states, and maximum payments of $40,000 to $60,000. So the schemes now being recommended is obviously more generous than that. The WA scheme originally had a maximum of 80,000. When they got the reports in, you only had 1 year to put your notification in, there was a lot more people than they thought. They only had a certain amount of money, and they reduced the maximum to 45,000. And that created huge issues and lack of trust for people in the scheme. So it's important, like in a scheme like this, that when you design it and set it up, you don't change it. Catholic churches run towards healing and the Melbourne response. between them made over 1,000 payments. Their averages are around $40,000 to $50,000, so a little more than the government schemes. The towards healing doesn't have a maximum payment, so one of the criticisms of towards healing is the lack of transparency in terms of how someone's abuse is assessed and how that translates into a monetary payment. And if you go back and read the submissions made about that, when these schemes were first put in place, the intention was for them to really be around facilitating an apology and maybe a small amount of money for some on a priority needs kind of basis, and then they subsequently became more like, well, no, a monetary payment's important, and the focus became more monetary payments, became much more legalistic, and a lot of dissatisfaction of the people who went through the process. They also went back and started to pay people more, and recognised the amounts that they'd been paying people weren't enough. So then you got a lot of complaints of inequity from people who accepted a payment of $10,000 and then subsequently found that, oh, well, they're paying $50,000 now and I would have got $50,000. So that's also created quite a lot of issues. The Salvation Army also had a redress scheme, which is about 500 payments, an average of 51,000. Again, we don't have any details about the exact ones of those. There's also been schemes overall, overseas. We did look at a number of those. The Irish Redress scheme, Redress Board in Ireland, that made about over 15,000 payments at an average of $100,000 each, and they had a maximum of 300,000, but a very legalistic process, so only a relatively small proportion of people got the maximum payment. And there's been a number of schemes in Canada, the largest of which was the Indian Residential Schools Scheme. That had these sort of common experience payments, so anyone who'd been at one of these Indian schools could get an amount of money for each year they were at the school, so it just acknowledged that just by being in one of those schools, even if you weren't actually abused, also the culture and also the fear of seeing other people being abused sort of had an effect on you. They made over 100,000 common experience payments, and they've also made around 40,000 individual assessment payments as well, which is sort of people who've been abused and made particular complaints. The Commission also made a number of recommendations on civil litigation. Their first one is the removal of limitation periods. So obviously limitation periods vary state by state. Some states have harder and softer limitation periods. WA in particular has a pretty hard 8 years, which cut out a class action against the Christian Brothers, I think, a number of years ago, although they did end up doing a negotiated settlement in any case. People say it's interesting, particularly governments say they will act as a model litigant, and people say, well, we don't try to use a limitation period as a defence, but it is used as a negotiation point, and it certainly does put people off making a claim. So the recommendation is to remove limitation periods for sexual abuse. This also recognises that people often don't confront, aren't in a position to be able to confront and talk about the sexual abuse for many years after it's occurred. The Commission recommended that was a retrospective change, so it doesn't just apply in the future, but in the past as well. And both New South Wales and Victoria have in effect removed the limitation periods. A second retrospective change is identifying the proper defendant. So a number of religious institutions don't have an incorporated body, and all their assets might be kept in a trust, and so there's actually no one with money to actually sue. And whilst I think that they have improved that, the Anglican Church has sort of set up this in Victoria, which 5 dioceses has set up 5 incorporated bodies to have someone who can be sued. Again, one of the recommendations is that occurs in any situation where an institution has money, but that money is kept in a trust or in a vehicle that can't be touched by the person making the allegation. The next two are prospective changes. So the first is around non-delegable duty and reverse onus of proof. So the reverse onus of proof, what that means is that in the future, an institution would need to prove that it took reasonable steps to prevent the abuse, which is sort of a difference to the situation today. So that if the abuse occurred, then they are at fault, that they are, it is their issue. They did have duty of care, is their issue unless they can prove that they took reasonable steps to prevent the abuse. So that's quite a big change. It doesn't go to strict liability, which is what they've come to in the UK just through court decisions, but it does strengthen the positions of plaintiffs quite a lot. And finally, and I should also say that in this non-delegable duty as well, that they've also defined in their who it should apply to, what sort of institutions it should apply to. They particularly carved out foster care, because institutions who organise foster care, can't sort of be in there sort of taking reasonable steps to make sure nothing occurs all the time. And also they carved out not-for-profit or volunteer organisations who organise cultural, social and sporting activities for children. Because obviously in all of this, there's a need to ensure that those kinds of activities that children participate in and that involve adults don't all disappear because everybody's just too scared of the legal liabilities. And the final one, there were some recommendations around guidelines for responding to claims along the sort of the government model litigant type guidelines that exist. But saying that should apply to all institutions who are looking after children. So just to quickly talk about the difference between redress and civil litigation. First of all, just generally it's all about hurdles. So there's a lot of hurdles for people pursuing civil litigation. I've talked about some of them already, the burden of proof and the statute of limitations and this issue of legal personality. There's also a cost issue. The plaintiff has to, bear the cost or find a legal firm who's prepared to take the cost of pursuing their claim. But the institutions are obviously at an advantage in terms of being able to fund the defence of their claim. There's the trauma of providing evidence and being cross-examined and being potentially queried and not believed, which can re-traumatise victims again. So there's a number of hurdles, that there are to civil litigation for victims, which there's some studies that suggest that civil litigation doesn't provide good outcomes for people in terms of healing compared with redress. So, one of the differences, or one of the things that we sort of turned our minds to a bit is volumes. How does the volume of civil litigation claims compare with the volume of redress claims? It's hard to get an exact handle on. I'll just give you a few figures. So we estimated 60,000 redress participants. There's been 3,000 civil claims to date, and that includes some sort of civil claims who've come through the Catholic Church redress processes. So the volumes are much, much larger. In Canada, with the Indian residential schools, there was 13,500 individual claims and 11 class actions when we set up that scheme. That compares with 100,000 plus people coming forward for payments. And in Ireland, they, not sure on what basis, but originally estimated 6,500 to 7,500 participants in their scheme. They ended up with 15,000 participants. So I guess all that goes takes me saying whatever we've seen in the context of civil claims to date is a fraction of the number of survivors out there who will seek redress or who may in the future seek launch a civil litigation claim, because through the Royal Commission, its work and some of its recommendations which are taken up, some of these hurdles will disappear. So actuarial challenges. So I sort of thought it might be useful to talk about the work we did to cost the national scheme and also then the insurers and institution liabilities. And we talk a lot at the moment about big data and how big data makes it easier for us to quantify and estimate things. Well, this is sort of like a case of no data. But I think, again, that's a very valuable part of actuarial work. And I think it's sometimes when actuaries sort of, provide some of their best inputs when they're putting a number on something that is quite, very difficult to measure. Because by doing that, you sort of can put financial frameworks around what you're trying to achieve. So with the scheme, I guess, there was nothing comparable. There's nothing directly comparable, and so we had to look at other stuff. So we looked at exposure. I'll come back to that. We looked at lots of other information, all the other information, lots of other information that we could find about institutions, child sexual abuse, and various things. I'll come back into that again. We used that information to come up with the number of participants and the severity. We also had to look at counselling costs, and I've got to put on here administrative costs. As I said before, we ended up saying 60,000 people, at an average of 65,000 for the monetary payment and 6,000 for counselling, coming up with a total cost of about $4 million. Not a small number. So exposure, what did we look at? We looked at child populations by decade, by state. We looked at school populations between government schools, private schools, Catholic schools. We found it really difficult to get numbers on out-of-home care populations. There's good numbers available since about the late 1980s, and there's very little available before that. We were fortunate that the Queensland ex-gratia scheme had done a bit of work trying to put that together for Queensland, and we used that together with things we knew about the child populations, things we knew about differences by state in more recent times in terms of proportions of children in care. It doesn't actually vary very much by state, by the way. We did make adjustments for the volumes of Indigenous population, because there are higher rates of Indigenous children in care compared to non-Indigenous children, and so we sort of did that to try and get an out-of-home care population for every state. We also tried to have a go at religious populations. There are, through censuses and things like that, there was information about that. 25% of Australians are Catholic. They have been for a long period of time. The composition of that's changed, but we managed to find things like the number of people regularly attending Mass, and so we used that as an idea about sort of the size of the Catholic population, how that might be changing over time. We also looked at, fortunately we were able to get some information from the existing Australian redress schemes. Some of it was on the site, some of it we started with what they published. We got some other stuff we managed to, in the end, for a couple of them, get all of their information, particularly for Redress WA. We were presenting to the commissioners on our results, and when we got back into the office, we finally got all of the Redress WA data, we previously had a sample, we had to sort of churn that overnight to go back the next day to sort of confirm whether our answer stayed at $4 billion or not, which it did. So we were fortunate that we got information from the existing Australian schemes, and that's obviously a great source. The Royal Commission did a project collecting civil claims. They collected claims from all the governments, state governments, from the Catholic Church, from the Salvation Army, and from a number of insurers. And that was about 3,000 claims from that we had. And we went through and categorised all those claims into the type of institution. We spent a lot of time on a website called Find and Connect. Some of them we could find, we tried to be smart and say, has this word in orphanage or this sort of thing, this is a residential setting. Some of them we just had to use Find and Connect, which is a website that puts the survivors of a lot of out-of-home care and different sorts of care in perspective. Google's wonderful as well. We managed to sort of find sort of what things were by doing that, and we categorised, I think, 90% of the claims into type of institution. The claims were quite good because we had quite a lot of information on the claims, and we could have a bit of a look at reporting patterns and mix them a bit to exposure and make some estimates of prevalence and changes in prevalence from that on a relative basis, not an absolute basis. We have private session information, so we have 2,500 private session information. So we weren't allowed access to that, but they gave us summaries of all sorts of institutions, which state, age profiles, all sorts of things, and demographics about those private session people. We looked at overseas schemes where we could and found out some information from some of those that helped us in some of our work. We read books, a book by Kath Daly on Redress and Institutional Child Sexual Abuse. We read academic research and literature. We found a paper by the John Jay College of Criminal Justice studying the sexual abuse from Catholic priests and deacons in the US between 1950 and 2002. That helped us find out things like 4% of priests had an allegation. That compared with 1% for the general population and less than 1% for Anglican priests. That helped us fill out some of the gaps that we had in some of our information where we had to make judgment calls about if this is so big, how big would the Anglican liability look like. We got studies from there of the number of victims per perpetrator, which I think will be very useful when we're sort of looking at individual institutions and their liabilities. Just to let you know, 50% of priests had only one allegation, 3.5% of priests had more than 10 allegations, with an average of 20 victims each. So 3.5% of priests were responsible for 26% of the allegations. And, I would say this is only allegations, it's not actual causes, but you do have this tremendous skew in the perpetrator, the victims per perpetrator, which will come to the actuarial challenges later you need to be really aware of and think about when you're trying to do your work. And we also found that we have done work for a couple of institutions and we have found that allegations per perpetrator holds in two different contexts that we've looked at in the Australian context. And victims of crime schemes. So we've had something from there that's to look at counselling. And the ACC in New Zealand also provided us with some data. ACC cover, there are no faults accident comp scheme, and they actually cover sensitive crimes, they call it, but we got some information from them on usage of counselling services. So this is just an example of how we came up with a number of participants and did this across the range of the schemes. So this is looking at Redress WA. So Redress WA had 5,300 participants, and after some time we found that they had 2,900 sexual abuse participants in that. That only covered residential homes and foster homes. So we had estimated that residential homes and foster homes represented 56% of all cases of abuse from the private session data, or 69% if we use the claims project information. And so we could gross up the 2,900 to total coverage of all institutions. We then said, well, the WA population looks like 8% to 11%, one was based just on child populations, one of those based on the private session information. And then the WA scheme is only open for 1 year and a month for notifications. So we used some information from the Irish Redress scheme, which was, I'll explain that a little bit, to gross that up in a very approximate way. So we said that the underreporting by 15% or 30%. Now, with the Irish scheme, that's got a really interesting reporting pattern. That was open for 3 years. Originally, they had 2,500 reports in 2003-2004. In 2005, for the first 3 months, they continued to have that same kind of volume, on a per month basis. It sort of ramped up a bit. In November, it's due to finish around at the end of December, they had 2,300 notifications, and in December they had 3,700. They then decided to leave the scheme open for another period, 2006 to 2011, and they had a further 2,700 notifications in that period. So we sort of tried to use some of that information to sort of understand what impact having a scheme has on notification patterns and recognising, despite how much you advertise the scheme, you still won't get everybody. And sorry, I should have also add back with the recommendations on the National Redress scheme, it doesn't have a closing period. It's just there for a decent amount of time. I should also actually add it only covers past abuse. it doesn't cover future abuse, so I forgot to say that. So the Commission believed that the recommendations they made on civil litigation in child protection and prevention and reporting and responding were sufficient to deal with future cases of abuse, so that the redress scheme is only proposed for past changes, for past abuse. To measure severity, we again used it. We were really fortunate to get the WA redress information, and they had a kind of a points system as well for various things, and we mapped their points onto the sort of process that the Royal Commission was suggesting, and came up with a severity distribution for the scheme. There's not a lot of it's not very distributed really. You don't get a real skew or anything like that. It sort of doesn't look. It was pretty uniform. So that was how we were able to do that. We didn't know exactly how we were going to do that till we got that information from WA Redress. And counselling costs, we used. We had to make assumptions about the age profile of participants, which we were able to, from information had by victims by age and institution types by decade, and we used the information from victims of crime from the ACC to look at intensity of services and how that would change over time. So I'll just try to hurry up a bit. So in terms of moving forward, with a $4 billion price tag, then this is how we think it's going to be distributed by sort of sector. So government about 20%, non-government secular 8%, Catholic 40%, Salvation Army 4%, other faith 16%, and non-government or unknown 10%. So that was based on private session type information. And, I think our view is that obviously all institutions that have dealt with children will have some liability, and any insurer who's offered public liability insurance sort of in the past will have some level of exposure, and the extent to which will depend on exactly who they underwrote and when. And I guess my views here, and I hope I sort of made sense, that the environment for child sexual abuse claims moving forward should be expected to be quite different to the past. There will be higher volumes and there will be higher sizes. And this is with or without a redress scheme. Because the Royal Commission itself, through the work it's done, the awareness it's raising it's done, through the case studies it's had, it is going to, and also through the recommendations it's made on civil litigation that have been taken up, it will be different. And on that I just want to give you a couple of examples. So there was a South Australian case, DC versus the Prince Alfred College in South Australia, and that was judged, I think, it was quite a recent one, but the judge found that the plaintiff was honest and a reliable witness, etc., but found that there were 6 principal questions for decision in the action against the college, but found against the plaintiff in each of them. And the reason that the original judge found against them was that the matter was substantially out of time, that the standards of 1960 in relation to the college's duty of care were relevant, not current standards. Vicarious liability for the behaviour of the boarding master was not held. The plaintiff was not under a disability, so could not extend the time. And there was no extenuating circumstances for allowing any sort of extension of time. So it found against the statute of limitations and the standards of the 1960s in terms of duty of care were relevant. That was appealed, and the finding was unanimous for the plaintiff by the full court of the Supreme Court in November 2015, and that the school did not apply appropriate supervision to the boarding master and created and enhanced the risk that the boarding master had. So there you go. I think, to me, I think that's quite a good example of how we will find the attitudes of the court are towards child sexual abuse claims. So as I said, insurers with any sort of portfolios will have some some exposure. It's still not clear if there's a redress scheme to what extent insurance contracts would be triggered by a redress claim, because the standard of proof is so much lower, but there'll certainly be some pressure, I think, on insurers to make some contribution. And obviously, to the extent that there's more civil litigation, then that would, of course, trigger insurance policies. So what do you have to think about? Well, I think you really have to think about exposure. What segments are you exposed to, when, what was the relative size of that exposure, as well as what type of insurance cover you've got, claims made, claims incurred, is it direct cover, is it insurance, is it index deductible or not? And if you do have a specific exposure, and I would suggest with the sort of skew that we find in the allegations to perpetrators, that if you have a large exposure, you will already know something about it. Then you have to think about the specific perpetrators, and you have to think about the specific exposures to those particular perpetrators, as well as the sort of general exposure that you might have. I think it's a time that actuaries need to start thinking about this. Actuaries who are advising institutions or insurers. You know, the Royal Commission's made its recommendations now. We've seen the governments in New South Wales and Victoria respond to some extent to those recommendations. We still don't quite know what's happening with redress, but I think, you know, we know that the environment is going to be different, and I think that actuaries definitely need to be doing their homework, getting the information together, trying to understand what the exposure might look like as well as possible at this stage. And another point I'd make there is that just sort of saying, oh, it's too difficult, or it might not happen, or, you know, it might be different. I think institutions, and so we did work, as I said, for a couple of institutions. What they found was just having a number helped them to start planning their financial commitments, and how that might look, and how that might emerge, and how they would fund it and pay for it. And by not doing that, then, you know, that's when you sort of create, I think, more issues. So I just encourage anyone in the audience who is working in any of those environments to you know, start trying to quantify the exposure. Thanks very much. I think we've got time for a few questions.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, Estelle. My name is James Pearson. I'm an actuary, but I'm also a director of a private school, and we have a meeting next week with our insurance broker to review our insurance policy in regard to this and other matters. I'm interested in some of the numbers you quoted that in relation to an interview that Francis Sullivan gave on ABC radio, where he said that the Catholic Church was going to pay its way. The discussions about the national scheme and how that it appears to be fragmenting a bit, but he said regardless of the format, the Catholic Church is going to pay its way. And he ventured a number of about $1 billion. Now, if you say your number is 4 million and 25% of people are Catholics, then that looks about right. But your other slide indicated that about 40% was going to be Catholic liability, which may have something to do with the sort of stats being thrown up in the American study, where the rate of perpetrators among Catholic priests seem to be higher than among Anglican priests. I just wonder if you'd like to comment on differential perpetration rates across institutions.
I would say from what we've seen, those have been the sorts of places we've seen them have been through contexts, and they've all been the same. Obviously, when you hear about institutions who have hidden perpetrators and move them around, then it seems to me that there should be in those cases the perpetration rate. That I think the skew potentially becomes much greater. So you know, the number of victims that the multiple victim people have is able to be a lot greater. So I would expect there to be a difference, but in the things I've looked at so far, I haven't actually seen that. I'm not sure where his billing came from. But they would also take account anything they've already paid to date, because the way the scheme would be set up is it is any payments made to date sort of come off anything that people have ordered from the national scheme.
Thanks, Estelle. John Newman. Could you just say a bit more about the allowance for payments that have been made to date? Because listening to your presentation, it wasn't clear to what extent there would be offset for cases where there's been civil litigation and quite substantial amounts paid. Does that actually close the case? From the Royal Commission's perspective, do they expect this redress scheme to apply whether there's been past payments made or not, and are they offset? Thanks.
Yes, having already received a payment from somewhere, we would still be able to make a claim against the redress scheme. However, any amount that you have previously received would be offset against any amount that you were assessed out under the scheme. I'm not quite sure how to do that on the counselling part, but that's the principle.
Hi, Estelle. Thank you very much. This is Nicholas Alderman from Swiss Re. With the lower standard of proof being applied for the redress scheme, one of the concerns has been around the potential for fraud and for false claims being made. In all likelihood, it's going to be fairly low, but I'm wondering how much has that been factored into the cost and the calculation of the scheme?
Well, I guess because I think it is difficult. Because what we used was the redress schemes that had already existed in WA, Queensland and Tasmania to kind of gross those up to come up with our figure. We felt that, to the extent that there was exaggeration or fraud, then, the particular exaggeration, then that would be captured by what we had done. I think there is a risk there, though, that the schemes being proposed is a lot broader than the schemes that have existed in terms of the types of institutions who've been covered. Those institutions also have been the subject of a lot of inquiry and public inquiries. There was the Ford inquiry in Queensland that basically found that every residential home in Queensland had probably been neglected if you've been in there between certain sort of decades. So, just being able to sort of show that you'd actually been in the residential home at a particular point of time kind of was almost enough. So, I think with the breadth of coverage and the broader coverage, it is more difficult. And I know that we did have one discussion with the commissioners about that and about how they would go about looking at that. If there's an allegation against a particular institution where there's been nothing previously, how will they deal with that versus an allegation where there's been more. But as I say, because we started off with redress scheme information, we felt that to some extent at least that would include any exaggeration issues.
Thank you.
Hi, Estelle. Warwick. Thank you very much for a very good talk. Have there been much discussion within the Commission or with yourselves around the attitude that the Commission expects insurers to take in their discussions with institutions, or have they just decided to let the free market operate and what gets negotiated?
I think it's the latter. I think that they started to go that way earlier on, and I think that they just pulled back from that, in my view, and just decided it's between the insurers and their clients and prospective clients to negotiate. I guess there's some reputational issues there for the insurance industry. It is a difficult question because if there is a redress scheme, then you get a claim and the claim goes through redress as opposed to going through civil litigation. So, there's obviously some moral obligation potentially, but yeah, they're leaving it up to individual negotiation. Oh, so this one I shall read out from Steve Fawkes. There were a number of recommendations mentioned from the Royal Commission, such as the removal of limitation periods from civil litigation. Is there a timeframe proposed for when the recommendations will be considered and possibly implemented? So in response to that, I don't know. I'd have to go and check in the report exactly. I don't recall a particular time frame. I think it was more, the recommendations were more in light of, state governments should do this or should consider that. It has been removed in New South Wales and Victoria, so there is no statute limitations anymore in those two states.
John Rathens, just really. So you mentioned that institutions who might have liabilities might find that the future, that their past is not such a good guide to the future. If you look 5 years down the track, what do you think would happen to claim sizes on a like-for-like real basis?
Look, I think my starting point would be that claims could probably be double what they have been in the past, because of the environment's different, the negotiations will be kind of easier, there'll be less to trade off. So that would be my sort of starting point. The average has been 80,000. Saying it's 160,000 doesn't seem to be, you would sort of say, oh no, that couldn't possibly be the case. 3 times, says Jeff. And in terms of volumes, I mean, we're talking 60,000 participants for a redress scheme. You can well imagine 15,000 civil claims. 35% of that. There's been 3,000 today. So it doesn't seem, as I say, I mean, these things are obviously going to be very difficult to quantify, but I think that none of those numbers sort of seems like that they're implausible. All right, well, if there's no other question, I'll thank you all for your being so attentive this lunchtime. And if you've got any other questions come up, please give me a call or email.